7. The committed life. My second mountain concept is a counter-reformation against individualism. It is moral, dependent, and passive, capable of explaining both love and cruelty. It is generous attachment. Instead of loving yourself, you should surrender, like the women in the Bible. Commitments to vocation, family, faith, philosophy, and community are all similar. Commitment begins with inspiration and is measured by time. Most grow love in cautious stages that eventually become deep and permanent. Tickled over time. I've not been hooked by love like foundational authors of the canon. I haven't trembled in agony before God, crying how I've been forever changed. Political causes, ideas can also subjugate through this type of transformation. Love is commitment, with its deepness measured in fidelity. It is an irrational promise without expectation of return. Musicians, worshipers, scientists, soldiers, patriots, lovers exemplify love as an identity. Contracts benefit, but covenants transform. Communal property states exemplify the commitment of marriage. Since emotions are fickle, the state should bind love with law, like other institutions. Structures support love when it falters. Commitments produce benefits. Identity can't be formed alone. A corrupt third world country can offer identity through existential urgency. Capacity is freed through chains of restriction that protect from destructive desire. Freedom through bondage. Commitments build character, and fatherhood is disciplined service. Love compels vows, requiring sacrifices to create habits that change one's nature. Desire is only replaced by desire. Altruism is selfishness. Temporary, provisional, and permanent commitments are the school for moral formation. Define yourself through passionate emotional intensity. 8. The second mountain. Inner city youth can meet their needs by befriending the rich and joining their vacations. I personally hugged such a youth once, with dreadlocks dripping over soulful eyes. We discussed GEDs, vocations, and healthcare, sexuality and depression, over spicy chicken. Joking and laughing, I avoided the crap in his life. These street kids select their new chosen parents, like flowers seeking the sun. Homeless, fostered, abused, and abandoned, misled. They are now enmeshed. Inner cities are fantastic for black youth, who can gift intolerance with entertainment. Love burst into flames, mysteriously, transforming us all. My friends raise money to educate these large, loving, hot messes. My friends spend 40 times your effort as a parent, literally saving children's lives. Life compensates the exhaustion of befriending unquestionably ethnic youth. This is my philosophy. And your cure. My friends at a think tank for war profiteers suggest isolation as society's main problem. We find people everywhere to fit our molds. effortlessly recruiting in the dozens. Jade Bach, Stephanie Hruzek, and Sam Jones. You've all earned my praise. And I can praise up to 1,000 more for joyfully embodying their labors indefinitely. The concept of heroic altruism didn't exist before the inception of America. I recognize teachers, artists, soldiers, owners in society, but especially the profitless. This is where I derive the values which I now share. It feels right to disengage from corrupt governments and open up local liquor stores. Rare cancers and murderous strippers can inspire football camps and fundraisers. There was once a husband who suffered depression, anxiety, apathy, anger, obsession. One day, Mommy came home to the cold, bloody bodies of her biblical children. Confused and unaffiliated, her husband had tried to shield them from guilt with murder. Now manic, hypercharged, and a bit out of control, she exemplifies my second mountain. With ferocious servitude, she works to compensate for the gory details of disparity. Anger and indignation fuel this defiant love. Emotionally shifted, their desires have been transformed through murder. I define 6 layers of desire as material, ego, intellect, altruism, romance, and spirituality. Man-made political economic systems have neglected cooperation for centuries. Intellect, altruism, romance, and spirituality are emotional and moral motives. Realizing shadows and bright sadness, we fall upwards into the wisdom of suffering. Testimonials from my readership validate my arguments. Hearts can be shattered and scattered, or shamelessly broken open into new capacity. Rabid dog, dead grandma, beatings, dead child, gangs, drugs, danger, abuses, inspire joy. Nonprofits shine brightness into cruel slums, spreading unconditional mother love. They help victim communities recover from the economic predations of globalization. I associate with and promote the fanatically dogmatic and irrationally uninformed. I associate with and promote the fanatically dogmatic and irrationally uninformed. These have become indoctrinated to assume responsibility for the world's ills. Radical hospitality means recognizing all lives. It's a calling for which people are chosen. Let's go to the wheel and surrender yourself to paradox. Self-initiated conscious choices cannot give meaning to your life. Reckless, irresponsible acts based upon simplified logic trump moral reflection. Dignity is derived from appearance. People don't realize the labor they give freely away. A gift transforms isolation into care. Realistically accepting long-term injustice and a lack of leadership provides stability. Deep relations eliminate loneliness and provide change. Social safety nets service the homeless, poor, traumatized, but don't transform them. Individuals with intrinsic morality, and not organizations and systems, drive change. According to my second wife, trust is honesty within the context of love and accountability. Creating space for deep conversation is as important as getting shit done. Understand that people project and conceal hatefulness due to their own pain. Victims of violence who might be crying for help require patience, not punishment. Your own crooked heart should keep you from judging others, because we all sin. Language that enforces hierarchies insults a person's dignity. We need new holistic approaches to educate. We need new holistic approaches to education and healthcare. And we should define charity in spiritual terms. Battles with angels, deaths of ego take us beyond our own mortality. Second, mountains shift from the egocentric immaturity to selfless maturity. There was once a Dutch Jewish girl with a distant father and a needy, chaotic mother. She was brilliant, but emotionally exhausted by her melodramatic household. She wrote of her indecisive, overwhelmed parents who gave her too much freedom. Insecure and directionlessness, she became fragmented and a depressed young woman. Torn apart by her independence, she dreamed of structure through companionship. As the Nazis invaded Holland, she began seeing a therapist who molested his patients. The therapist complimented her physical and mental fortitude. Using the pretext of therapy, this authority figure seduced her intellectually and sexually. But his coherent worldview, which birthed her soul, made up for his perversities. His death taught her passive meditation and reestablishing connections with eternity. One day, while meditating on a tree, she recognized her instinctual analytic nature. She let go of obligations and moved unconsciously, realizing spiritual peace. She longed to urgently become an instrument for someone's patriarchal deity's ideal. She began to practice kneeling, which arose an almost sexual degree of shame. The eternal currents of spiritual revelation impede knowledge and understanding. Nazis started rounding up Jews, and this young woman sought shelter from storms. She itemized missing neighbors, fathers, sons, and protected herself through prayer. She felt called to save her people, acknowledging that they are out to destroy us. As genocide spread, she decided personal improvement precedes the geopolitical. With Nazis extinguishing love from the world, she enlarged her own heart. Caring for her own, she comforted teen girls and hated herself before hating others, admitting death into her life. She appreciated blouses and bars of soap. She did not go into hiding due to her solidarity, courage, and commitment. She joined the Jewish Council, a Nazi puppet bureaucracy which legitimized violence. Transcending herself, she built a new society inside as she assisted extermination. She cared for kids and the old, but felt a special sadness for the formerly rich and famous. Radiating warmth, she used privileged access within violent systems to serve others. This young girl witnessed daughters poisoning their own mothers out of sympathy. But despite the terrible misery that surrounded her, she skipped along her barbed wire. One day, her own name, as well as that of her family members, appeared on the transport list. Devastated, she recovered within an hour and regained her sparkling good humor. Divining a random Bible passage, like tea leaves, she gave meaning to her life and died The point of life is to unify your fragmented pieces into a coherent single vision. Like my hierarchy of desires, there exists a ranking of unity within tranquility at the top. This happens through suffering, not introspection. Absolute surety is happiness. Blending commitments together and servicing them coherently makes for a joyful life. Thus, my practical adventure spiritual guidebook on vocation, marriage, creed, community. The Four Commitments, Part 2, Vocation. 9. What vocation looks like. Whew. The brilliant George Orwell shamelessly admitted his own low and selfish motives. He was driven by a hierarchy of ego, aesthetics, understanding, and persuasion. Working the beat in his empire's largest colony, he considered transferring departments. Officer Orwell played homeless and got a job, giving him credibility as an anti-authoritarian. He then claimed possession, reinventing writing in a painful illness of self-suppression, helping anarchists in Spain lose the Spanish Civil War. He decided truth is not absolute. He non-sarcastically pledged himself against totalitarianism and for democratic socialism. Purified by war, he ruthlessly wielded a smoldering anger against friend and foe alike. A joyless, conflicted man, he came to be canonized by militarizing hungry mobs. Officer Orwell exemplified vocation. Careers engage attention, motivation, identity, empathy, memory, truth, and language. In contrast, a vocational calling irrationally sinks into a pre-evolved reactionary self. The concept of calling can originate from personal bias. It can also be due to framing history morally in collectivist, racist, and gender terms. Since nature has no meaning, authority provides a method to avoid self-destruction. Victims should take responsibility and serve their captors, forsaking their own happiness. A vocation compels its host toward irrational acts and eventual self-enrichment. Officer Orwell shows how identity can be constructed as ex post facto rationalization. A poet walking home after a party was once inspired by nature. He describes himself thankfully bound to a secret pact under the threat of moral judgment. He compelled himself, then and there, to capture his emotions and complete his destiny. But that's probably not how it happened. The poet had some rich friends. One died and left him with a stipend, while another gave him use of his grand estate. Vocations can seem spiritual, but actually just be the rebranding of confused screw-ups. Vocations can seem spiritual, but actually can just be the rebranding of confused screw-ups. 10. The Annunciation Moment. There was once a young boy who, when his parents divorced, consoled himself with nature. Decades later, he wrote how he was astonished by creatures and behemoths. He felt a sense of belonging to a hidden underworld that replaced his failing family. His memoir explores this exposure to nature during the critical time of his trauma. Passion is conceived during such annunciation moments. Childhood trauma or exposure to suffering creates unfulfilled needs. And then the beautifully sublime strikes one dumb with wonder, like a big animal. A person entranced by wonder devalues themselves for the sake of affiliation. Beauty grants the observer an innocent wild vertigo as one falls through its levels. My kids felt at home with a confusing world in pretty places, like sports and philosophy. Greeks described beauty in terms of calling, and Renaissance artists felt called to beauty. Einstein once remembered a formative childhood experience occurring during sickness. This led to a music, nature, God, unified morality obsession, lasting the rest of his life. Einstein's metaphysical devotion was derived from the harmony of natural law. Obviously no genius. I share genius traits, such as feelings of childhood abandonment. I've spent about 99% of my time since childhood writing to feel right with myself. A philosopher who mocked Christianity suggested drawing a line through fulfillment. He then went further to offer that one's passions could form a fundamental law of self. Freakishly unlikely circumstance can recontextualized. Freakishly unlikely circumstance can be recontextualized upon retrospection. A lack of possibilities becomes good fortune. That boy with a broken family was blinded. That boy with a broken family was blinded in one eye during a freak fishing accident. The same year, he found out he liked ants, which was convenient considering the eye. He found out he liked ants, which was convenient considering the eye. He's since achieved scientific greatness, reacting to trauma with professional passion.